Well, it's time now for another panel, and as they assemble, I'll pass you over to Karin May.
Just to kick off, I'm going to introduce two of our panellists who you haven't yet met today. First of all, Jordan Williams, Associate Professor Jordan Williams is head of the creative writing discipline at the University of Canberra and has extensive experience in employing creative arts practice for health and wellbeing, and she has mentored ill and injured military personnel in creative practice. Also introducing Karin Foxwell, give a wave. Karin has significant experience in trauma psychotherapy, utilising art therapy, working with veterans and first responders with PTSD, so part of the program that Holly is researching. She commenced working with the Road Home at the Repat Hospital and is now based at the Australian Centre of Excellence for Post-Traumatic Stress, working one-to-one with veterans and first responders with PTSD in her program, which is being evaluated. So thank you, everyone. And you met everybody else today. Okay, we'll kick off. I'm actually going to just ask a question, first of all, for Jordan. So you're involved in the Defence Arts Program and other arts practice programs at the University of Canberra, which I understand the focus is more on art practice and its therapeutic benefits as opposed to art psychotherapy, as Holly was talking about. So I'm just wondering how your program has developed and why you believe art practice is so powerful in relation to mental health.
So in 2014, we were presented with this wonderful opportunity through Ian Drayton, who was our business manager at the time, ex-SAS, Churchill Fellow, wonderful chap, to work with Defence to develop a 4-week intensive program focusing around arts practice for injured, ill and wounded currently serving personnel. So we grabbed that with both hands, and so we had to bring to that what we had as a strength to offer, and that was our skills in creative writing and visual art in particular. So our approach developed out of that. We are not art therapists, and what we do is not therapy. So we work with what our strength is. And as people such as Josh, for example, have mentioned, and Miranda mentioned very early on yesterday, we know that many people who are diagnosed with various conditions choose not to engage with evidence-based programs. The evidence says they work, but often they choose not to engage, or as I have found with the military people I've met, they are all engaged because they're current serving and they have to be engaged, but they are not engaged. So I think what the program offers is an ability to see themselves as something in addition to their illness or their injury or their wounded status. So they are learning new skills, they are finding a different way of telling whatever it is they have to tell, and we don't require them to talk about what's made them ill or injured. If they want to, they can write a science fiction novel. It's up to them. 90% of them choose to write about their life story, but some choose to deal with it in other ways. So, their excitement, even by day 2 of this program, in thinking, oh my God, I can actually do something other than be broken. I think that's what we work with. What do we have to offer? It's something so basic and simple. It's that we can sit with them. So we sit with them and beside them in their joy and in their grief and in their pain and in their struggle and in their triumph. And alongside that, we can just, as they need a new skill around writing, maybe it's writing poetry or writing non-fiction or whatever, we can bring that to the table and we can sit beside them as they tell their stories. So I think it's all about, being an academic and worse still, like a cultural studies academic. I have this postmodern notion of multiple identities, and so they can add another identity, which is writer or visual artist or music performer, along with that identity that they don't lose, which is injured, ill veteran, husband, wife, lover, father, mother, soldier.
Thank you. And I should mention one of our staff at the Road Home who's not here today, Kaz Pedersen. We've got too many Karens in our organisation, Kaz, Karin and Karin. But she's been running the inpatient art program in the hospital, which is an art practice program, and she's extremely talented in working with vulnerable communities. But many of the patients, while they're in the veteran hospital, leave the hospital with a new interest in art or music, and she does uses the most incredible mediums. And I was lucky enough to launch an exhibition last week, and just the pride on not only the veterans who participated's faces, but also their family members is just unbelievable. So yeah, very powerful. Now I'd just like to jump to Sharon. So Sharon, obviously we heard your presentation earlier on StoryWrite and know your background in writing and creative writing, but you've also been involved in creative writing as supporting a program, but also in the new drama practice program that's been developed with the State Theatre here in South Australia. And I'd just love to hear more about your experience of that.
And I've also done some work with Karin as well, which has been wonderful and transformative. And I suppose just as someone that's spent my entire life believing that words somehow can capture reality, certainly I've learned, particularly through having joined the military as a second career later in life, that sometimes words do not capture everything. And sometimes we need something more than just language, or indeed we need language in other forms. And certainly I think what struck me, particularly with the drama piece, was when I really started to interrogate this, was how in the military so much of our language has a crossover with drama. We talk about theatres of war, we talk about actors, we talk about having a playbook. When there's an incident, there's a script to which we must adhere, and we have to follow a particular way of performing and doing our roles. And also, in order to do that, and to refer back to the previous presentation we saw, we have to don a mask. We're not able to show perhaps how we're feeling, the distress, the panic, all of those natural feelings. And I think that what's really powerful with creative therapies and some of the work, obviously, that many of our panellists here are involved in, and many of you attending today, is that having a safe place where you're able to take off that mask and somehow access those thoughts and feelings and somehow bring them to awareness using something other than words, whether it's through art, whether it's through performance, whether it's through expressive writing where actually fiction is sometimes more truthful than fact. I just believe passionately in the power of those things, and certainly it's something that I'm exploring myself as a veteran, and I'm also seeking to support as a peer-to-peer worker in the field.
Karin, we just spoke earlier about being witness to recovery, and I know in your role of working extensively one-on-one in a trauma psychotherapy role with veterans over the last few years, but we also spoke about the challenges and the misconceptions around art therapy and how do we overcome those, and people constantly saying to you, oh, but I'm not good at art, I can't do art therapy, or misunderstandings that they'll be asked to sit at a table, choose pencils, crayons or paints and produce something, and then you'll sit back and analyse it and go, so what would you say to that? And you know, we were talking earlier about the neuroscience and you know, your video, Melissa, was so powerful in showing what we know about trauma is it often shuts down that, you know, that prefrontal cortex, which is where we get speech from, and we have all these talk therapies out there, and that powerful video showing that the mask suddenly unlocked something. So Karin, what can you tell us about what you do?
That is a very common thing, that people come very, very nervous. they believe that they will not be any good at this. That is really sort of allayed quite quickly, because the first time I see them is we're just introducing each other, so we get to know each other. So look, we have to build up the relational content first. We have to get along, we have to understand each other. That therapeutic alliance is very, very important to put in place from the beginning, because if that's not there, nothing is going to change. Nothing will start, nothing will be authentic, and it won't go anywhere. So that's the big part, is building up that rapport with somebody. And so with this misconception that it is coming along to make art as such terrifies people, especially veterans, because they're really very, highly intelligent people. And they're sitting in a room just surrounded by pencils and paint, and there's, things up on the wall that other people have done in the past, and they can't look at any of it, and they sit there and we just talk, and it just warms and melts, and they don't have to do anything in the first session. And it's really about giving them the autonomy to make a choice about whether they want to do this or not. So it's a very gentle process to start this. And nearly every time they do return, and they return and they return, because they know that their story can come forward in a gentle way that is acceptable to their experience. The beauty of art therapy is when trauma experience is externalised. It literally is externalised. Something's put down on the paper. It can be a stick figure. It can be anything. It can be a tiny little mark. It doesn't have to be anything. It doesn't have to look like anything to me. We both know what it is. And it's a point to make too. They don't have to tell me anything about their past trauma. That's actually quite a huge relief to people. They don't have to go over the facts again and again and again. So that may never be mentioned, but it invariably comes into the practice. So when this image has been made, we put it up on an easel and then push it away from the table. And they've literally created distance between their feelings, and they have a really objective way of looking at what they're experiencing. It's as simple as that. And they find it magical. They can't believe that it's something so simple can actually assist them to understand what they're feeling. And it just goes from there. It's really amazing. And it's a weekly basis. So it's up to 90 minutes weekly. So that's a good, regular and consistent treatment.
And I know, like some of the other programs that have been talked about today, you're dealing with whole of life story. It's very much a client-led process on what they want to do, whether it's purely to manage symptoms, which is often the initial intention, and then often it changes over time to decide to process trauma. And we've often discussed it as a gentle sort of trauma exposure treatment, client-led trauma exposure treatment, which is quite interesting.
They're coming to, they actually, if you could call it, therapise themselves. They see themselves in the work. I'm not there telling them anything they don't already know about themselves. In fact, that unconditional positive regard one must have for someone in the room with them, that has to be, part of that is to be there when they discover things about them. There's no judgment. It's just, I'm a witness to what they've just discovered about themselves. Yeah. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know of any, but I agree. I mean, both of them, if you've heard of the concept of flow, so the ability to get in a flow, both athletes do that, and so do artists, and so do military personnel. And so I think that it's a beautiful relationship that could occur, and both, I meant to say this earlier, they get to be active engagers versus passive engagers, and that has them completely motivated and engaged, in their life. And then I think that helps with engagement and care. And so we have actually been, a couple people I've been talking with back in the US and the UK and then here, how we can somehow incorporate the arts around maybe the Invictus Games or the Warrior Games back in the US. So I'd be happy to look into that. Yeah, thank you.
I'm pretty sure Wounded Warriors does have an arts program that runs in the evening for people who want to select into that. I'm not sure if there's research output about that. But yeah, obviously a really fertile area for some research.
It's actually seeing the potential of a human being coming through, whether it's art, whether it's sport, whether it's whatever it is. It's the potential of that human being. It's the essence of them coming in again. So, I mean, you can quantify that, you can qualify that. That's really what it is that they've been trusted to have a go, and they have a go, and they've got the benefits from it. It's the same. I think they're not mutually exclusive.
I think an interesting point, and I'm not sure if there's research on this, is that when I meet the people in the creative writing group on arts, I am confronted with a group of people who are so resilient. Often their resilience is spoken of in a deficit fashion. To be there with what they've been through, which I can only begin to imagine, considering taking on, like in some cases, taking on a creative writing 4-week intensive when they can barely write a sentence, that is resilience. And I'm wondering too whether there isn't, a certain, maybe even a higher level of resilience in people who take on the sporting side of things. So I'm just wondering whether or not sometimes we're capturing in some of these programs people who maybe not only don't have a lower level of resilience that needs raising, but maybe for a start have something higher there. Or maybe it's tied to this notion of post-traumatic growth. Maybe that growth process has already started by virtue of, the trauma or whatever. I just think there's a kind of a gap there that might be worth looking at too.
Very briefly, going on from that, is that with the Invictus Pathways program, if this is something that hasn't been closely explored, there might be possibilities of having the people in the Invictus Pathways program do journaling or engage in some kind of creative arts process. It wouldn't be art therapy, so to speak, but that might be an opportunity because they're already often doing, recording their own progress in their own ways beyond what is being recorded structurally through the University of South Australia. So that might be an opportunity to then actually do structured research the way you were just asking about as well. So just eyeing off the people who are involved in that program, perhaps that's an addition that could happen over the next couple of years as the program expands.
Any other questions out there at the back?
So I work in a public primary school with kids with trauma issues, and I do physical concepts. So the sport and everything does one thing, but the art and the resensitizing is the other part. And when both sides of our brain work together, we get balance, and that's where we get growth. So I don't know, yes, I just wanted to add that because I'm one of those little people in Melbourne that do work with first responders and veterans, and Australia's so far behind because it's all out there, all these amazing studies are out there, but all our organisations are sort of, well, and it is a small view, but all sport related, and it's the balance. It's the balance, and that's what we're doing in also the Royal Commission into Abuse did an amazing report on supporting carers and peer support and balance. And so I think that's the area, it's balance. Yeah. You can't just go one way or we're in balance. The body needs both.
Did I see another hand up over here?
Look, it's been really fascinating listening to so many different ways of coming together and having open conversations about what might work in a more person-centred environment, which is really looking at that individual and what they need. I'm sort of very curious around generational change and how some of these things that we're talking about as adults could be applied for children coming through, because they're going to be the next layer of people coming through experiencing what we're experiencing, and how do we build some of that resilience and the skill base that they need to actually probably avoid some of the things we're experiencing at the moment, or at least soften what we're seeing or make it in some way better. So that's, I suppose, just a question I have.
I completely agree, and I mean, secondary, tertiary trauma. I mean, this is intergenerational, and so I think I mentioned that one of the next pilots we're going to look into is the family program. We do have an art therapist in one of the Intrepid Spirit satellites. So I'm at the NICO, but there's 8 other Intrepid Spirits that are smaller versions of the NICO around the U.S. But like I said, she can work with dependents, so spouses and their children alone. Whereas I have to have the families come in with the service member, and they're kind of the secondary thought, which is frustrating. I mean, we're slowly changing, but this pilot will be completely for the family members, and their service member veteran doesn't have to be in care for them to get care. So I agree that we need to be looking at children. We need to be looking at the children, maybe going into the school setting. I mean, I've heard. There's an art therapist in Vicenza, Italy, on one of the military bases there, and she said that in the teens, unfortunately, they are seeing some suicidal ideation and attempts that are coming down from, I think, this very long, these conflicts that we've had, and their parents being deployed over and over and over again. And you're right, the stress definitely falls on them too. So we're working on it. Thank you.
For those who enjoy the neuroscience around this area of trauma, working with children, similar to working with trauma, that overcoming the issues of speech and developmentally appropriate treatment, many therapists working with children and families use creative mediums and sand play and play therapy to overcome those issues and actually find a different way to be able to express what's going on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I was thinking even broader than the community we're talking about at the moment, but really just societal change in terms of how we adapt and overlay the learnings that we're having, from these 3 days. Yeah, cool.